get her. Oh, that's Nolan. There you can. Too close to the road.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the family, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for your love and your support. I want to tell you guys, you can just tell you guys have an amazing family. You really do. You just see the love. And we live in a pretty great community. I'm biased because I live here, but we live in a good community. We come here this afternoon to remember and to celebrate an amazing lady, Jamie Lynn Walls. We're going to start with a word of prayer. Father God, this is a shock to us. We didn't see this coming, didn't expect this, Lord, and it hit really hard. And Lord, I thank you that nothing catches you off guard. I thank you that you're bigger than all things, including death. You conquered it. And Lord, I pray that you would pour your presence and your spirit upon this place, upon this family, the friends, this community, and you would just carry them just step by step through this process, Lord, as we glorify you and honor Jamie. And Lord, again, I ask for your peace and your blessing upon it. We all ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. This time I'm going to ask Brian to come up.
Yeah, so my name is Brian. I'm Greg's oldest brother and blessed to have known Jamie, I think something like 25 years between the dating process and marriage and things like that. No funeral is a good funeral. It's always challenging, the grieving process, letting go of someone. It's obviously very challenging in this situation. But in some ways, it's a happy story in a way. I've been to teenage funerals with the business that I'm in, the ministry that I'm in, and I've been to people cut short way earlier in life. So praise the Lord that we've had Jamie for 50 some years. The good Lord gave us. It was a blessing in a huge way for 50 some years. And I've been to funerals of 80-year-olds that we've been reaching to find anything positive to say about that individual because they were so crotchety and so mean and things like that. And this is not that story, that Jamie lived a life so well that we can't capture everything that she blessed so many people with. It's a happy problem to have today, to try to fit this in and try to represent her well. It's a giant responsibility. I was blessed to interview, I think, about 6 to 7 family members in the last couple days about Jamie. I somewhat knew Jamie. I didn't know her. I just learned a lot about her. It was just really fun to interview people and hear just how she impacted them and things that they even found out about that they didn't even know and so forth. And so that was a blessing. The number one thing that I heard out of almost everybody in one way or another, I either heard the exact words, selfless, or it came out some other way. Opposite selfish. The number one thing that people said that she was selfless, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The second thing I often heard about her was ornery, that she had an ornery streak. And that kind of played out in 2 different ways. And we'll talk about that, but I don't want to tell, actually, Sherry's going to share. So Sherry's going to come up, I believe Allie's going to come up, and Kristen's going to come up and share a little bit. And so Sherry's going to cover some of those fun stories I think you'll enjoy. But I think, sorry, changing my notes on the fly here. So I think part of the orneriness came out of just a pure desire to laugh. Rachel, I think, described her mom as a goofball. She's funny. Cindy mentioned she's witty. She has a great sense of humor. If you know her on Facebook, if you ever followed her on Facebook, she just has a ton of material. She was helping all of us get through the coronavirus in terms of all the funny things that she would post on there. Our side of the family, she was known for her birthday cards. I think initially we would open up a birthday card and like, oh my word, who gave that birthday card? And it was like, really, Jamie? The quiet little Jamie is the one that came up with that card. And so she was always known. Later it was like, oh, that's Jamie's handwriting. Let's get ready for this card. It should be good. And she'd be smiling over there. There's an element too of her orneriness was also her way of maybe getting back at a few people, and those stories will come out. The famous chili powder story that you'll hear about later, and so forth. Which, by the way, I heard the chili powder story once, and then I hear another version. an offshoot of it. Then I hear another offshoot. Then I hear another offshoot. And it's amazing how some of these things kept going. And so one of the stories that I don't think is going to be covered elsewhere is one that she didn't get done, that she's been planning for a while. So from my understanding is my brother-in-law Tim, my sister Christy's husband, he had always agreed with Jamie. And Greg and Tim are really close. He's almost like the little brother that Greg never had, so they pal around together. And so he's always at Greg's house and vice versa. They're always doing projects together. And Tim would always say, whatever Jamie says, I agree with. And so he did that. But recently, he was at my mom and dad's house, and my mom has these towels that you clip over the doorknob or whatever and so forth. And Jamie was going on and on about how she loved Mom's towels like that. And Tim started to kind of mock her, like, oh, you're just brown-nosing her and so forth. And somehow he went from, chosen status to crossing her. And so she knew that he does not like clowns. For whatever reason, they just really bother him. And so she was plotting. Now, this is one of the things she would do is way ahead of time figure out these advanced pranks. There's a spontaneous piece to it. Like she would just seize the moment and see, wow, this chance that this thing just popped up, I can grab it and use it. That's, those stories will come out. But there was also this planning ahead of time. And so she had this elaborate plan where she was going to rent a clown. Sorry, Tim, I'm spoiling this for you. Maybe we can still do this to you later. She was going to rent a clown costume and just hide in his garage so that next time he came home, she would just be standing there and get him. So, I think Cindy even mentioned, she said, I'll never prank her because I just knew that it would always come back 10 times worse. So, and I was talking to Mrs. Snyder about how, when this pranking kind of started, and she was talking about how, it was probably a development later in life, but there was always kind of an ornery streak in her. And even as a little girl, she would get a little bit frustrated, and she'd pack her bag, and Grandma Snyder lived up the hill, and so she would just pack her bag, and she'd say, I'm running away from home. And so Mrs. Snyder would just call later and find out, did she make it up to your house? Yep. Okay, we'll come get her later. Let her do her time. So she always had, even though she's a little quiet and so forth, she's always had that streak of not crossing her and so forth. And what I'm going to talk about in general on these is just her love. So she loved to be ornery. One that I put down is that she loves to be quiet. Well, then I got kind of different takes on this loves to be quiet thing. I think Kristen even said, I've heard that, but I've never seen that. I just don't see it. And so Cindy talked about it, that it was often mistaken as rude, but that she wasn't. She was just always, actually it was a way of her being kind, that she was constantly observing. Her mind was constantly working, that she was highly intelligent. Mrs. Snyder's mentioned that she got that probably from her a little bit on the quietness. But she had strong opinions. Actually, if you got to know her and she felt free enough to share, that she would actually let you know what she thought. I think Kristen shared that she got to know her boss, who her boss originally thought, she's like, wow, I thought your mom was pretty quiet. And then we had a staff meeting, and she really let us know what she thought and gave us a few opinions. So she studied as a medical assistant, but ended up doing a lot more with administrative work in the medical area, and that might actually allowed her to freed her up more to take care of the family, as obviously she was phenomenal in terms of taking care of the family. Mrs. Snyder mentioned she was soft-spoken, but she was honest. And I think even Rachel mentioned she's more of a mama bear than I ever was. She also loved to relax. She had all different ways of relaxing. She loved her country western music, recently specifically Luke Bryan. And Kristen and her got to go to a concert, I think last fall together, which was awesome. She loved her Bobby Bones talk show in the morning. She loved to read. I think Mrs. Snyder mentioned that she would like to take a book, and she would even hide behind her dad's chair as a little girl and loved to just read. She was a bookworm in a lot of ways. She loved the beach. They've been to the Outer Banks, I think 5 or 6 times, Florida a few times, and then recently to Delaware. I think Greg described it as she loved the ocean but didn't like the water. So in some ways, She loved to go in the water, but the minute she couldn't see her feet, that's when the trouble started, and she would back out and so forth. So Greg, kind of a funny story, Greg bet Sarah that if she could get her mom underwater over her head, he would give her $100. Well, Sarah, who's smart in her own right, figured out, I'm going to go talk to mom, and we'll split this 50-50. So she did. She went to Jamie, said, hey, let's work this out, and they did it. Didn't tell Greg. Split the money. So Greg, once again, this family, I don't know if I could live on Narrow Street. I don't think I could keep up with all the pranks and the advanced planning some of this stuff takes. Greg later, Sarah's on I think it's down in the Dominican on a mission trip, and she's coming back, and Kristen and Jamie are fighting about who's going to get the first hug at the airport, and they're all sitting there. And Greg's watching this, and finally Greg texts Sarah and says, hey, she doesn't know what's going on back here. So Greg texts her and says, you know what? If you hug me first when you get back, I'll take you to Chipotle. So here Sarah gets back, and she practically has to like dive through the crowd to give Greg the first hug. And of course, Jamie finds out about it later and says, you cheated, Greg. So, but yeah, and she liked her rest. Obviously, we would tease her, if she found a good recliner or something, she would be out. But the amount of work she did for the family and in life and things like that, I think I would fall asleep in an easy chair too at the rate she worked in terms of taking care of everybody. She loved to be selfless, as I mentioned. We talked about that relaxation. She did like to relax, but the minute somebody needed something done, she was on it. She was on to serve. She put her own self behind in the need of others. Some of the things Greg was even sharing that he's found out in the last week, or he found out recently, things that he didn't even know or he forgot about. Christy, my sister, shared that when Olivia was born, she came early, and there was complications, and she had to be at the hospital and things like that. And they didn't even know how Jamie even got in their house, but she ended up cleaning their house top to bottom before Christy even got home. Just another example of great. The St. Jude's thing, I don't know if you saw on the obituary, it said if you wanted to give some money, that they would recommend St. Jude's. Greg didn't even know she had been giving to St. Jude's for quite a while, and then said, hey, how long has that been going on? Well, it's been going on for a while. She didn't feel the need to tell anyone, and that's what Jamie was about. She was about selflessly giving and not necessarily putting the spotlight on herself. I thought it was really cute was Mrs. Snyder was sharing with me, even when she was little, like she's always had this nurturing, helping mentality that even when Cindy was born and she wouldn't even say, she might mention that the diaper needs changed, Jamie would run to the next room and get the diaper. And she would always want to hold her sisters and help and be a little mom ever since she was little. And just this nurturing, caring for others. Rachel mentioned she's constantly taking the kids, willing to take off work to take them to the doctor. Just a life of just serving others. Phenomenal. She loved her grandkids and kids in general. So if you're not familiar, her nickname was Mamie to the family, to mostly, especially Greg was Dado. I think Greg was at least a mispronunciation. The kid trying to say his name, one of the grandkids. But they always had, some of Greg was sharing, they always had a kid at the house. Jamie just loved seeing a pile of shoes at the front door. That just brought her so much joy of hosting everybody. Recently, they had a home improvement project, so they couldn't host people for a while. And so recently, they were fortunate to have like Jaden one night and Maddie another night, a different grandkid each night. And that was really special, given that just recently happened and how appropriate that she got to host everybody one quality night. She was a great cook. She brought a lot of things, but I think it was really her gift of hospitality. Kristen shared really one of the things that she was really key about her is her instant acceptance of others. No matter how you came into the family, she welcomed you and no questions asked. Aubrey was recently added. Boom, she's added in the family. Made her feel like she had been there always. I asked Kristen, I said, do you think even your nursing background is kind of born out of your mom's gift of hospitality, of caring for others? And she said, yeah, I think so. And it went beyond her own grandkids. She loved her nieces and nephews. She loved her cousins and so forth. Cindy shared she's always checking on the girls. And Greg once mentioned that she said she often walks right past the adults to go check on the kids. She loved her daughters immensely. Greg mentioned when they met at Arby's, if you're not familiar, they were both working at Arby's back in the day. When they met at Arby's and they advanced from coworker to dating, the first thing she said to him was, "My daughters are the center of my universe, and you need to know that." And that would have been mostly Rachel and Kristen then, but she would say the exact same thing about Sarah even too, obviously later. Both Kristen and Rachel, when I interviewed them, they both ironically repetitively used the word unconditional love. They said, "Mom unconditionally loved us." And that was amazing. I asked them both, does that affect you even as a mom today? What have you learned? Kristen said, she allowed us to be ourselves, guided us, never disappointed in us, nudged us back on the path. Didn't matter how many times we hurt her, she loved us, accepted us. Kristen even mentioned she's tried to apologize at times for being a knucklehead, earlier in life, and Jamie would just brush it off. It's okay. You were a teenager. You were a young 20-year-old. You're gonna make mistakes. It's okay. Didn't hold a grudge. Rachel mentioned she learned more than I realized. Even if you were a black sheep or a different path, it didn't matter. Mom accepted you, loved you, cared for you. One of the other things she loved with action. So in other words, I think Rachel mentioned she loved in her own unique way. So she was not flowery with words. She wasn't like maybe what you see maybe on some TV moms, that she was, very huggy and a lot of flowery words, but that she loved with action, with what she did in her life. Matter of fact, she was known especially for not being a hugger. She was not a big hugger. And I guess what was funny is one of her last texts was about the coronavirus and how when this whole thing ends, I'm going to give you all a big hug and it's going to be awkward. So, which was funny given her aversion to hugging. So, she loved her sisters and her parents deeply. And I saw this as an outside, as someone on the other side of the family, how much she talked about her sisters and her parents and her family in general, how deeply she loved them and just looked forward to going to see them or just spending time with them. Sherry mentioned we were best friends, not just sisters. She was one I could have meltdowns with and talk with. Both sisters talked about constant communication, that we either talked or we had text almost every single day. Cindy mentioned she often started conversations with, "Hey, you busy?" We got along so well. She was a phenomenal sister. She set a high bar. She was always checking on her and her husband and so forth. And she was smart, very smart. And that might have came also from that lack of being more of a listener than a talker, right? From my understanding with Cindy and Tim is that they dated for a long time in high school, and then they had a significant breakup, something like 9 months to a year. And Jamie said, "You know what? I bet you $50 you're going to get back together again." And oh no, we're at different odds. And sure enough, they did. Made a great story, and I guess at the wedding, Cindy even gave her the $50 bill, saying, "You're right." She loved Butler, obviously a great town in terms of family values, a great place to raise your kids. Even teasing Cindy and Tim a little bit about that they're moving away to the big city. Not Columbus, but Belleville, and so, but it was more out of a love that she didn't want him to be very far away. So, Mrs. Snyder, I was talking to her, and she was talking about how Jamie always checked on them, constantly checked on them, and then when she hadn't even heard from them, she would walk up and knock on the door. "Hey, you guys okay? Just want to make sure you guys are okay." Always checking. So, lastly, I want to talk about. I wouldn't say that she loved a legacy, but she did leave a legacy. So, two facets with this. One, her favorite verse was Galatians 6:9 that said, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." And she obviously lived by that. Two parts of the legacy Greg wanted me to talk about. One was that her legacy lives on. Once again, we would have loved to have her for another 20, 30 years, but her impact is gonna live on for a long time. Her words that she said, or her actions as an example, will be a legacy for all of us to live by. The second part of that is the challenge of it. The challenge is that there's a big hole. She was a very active grandmother, very active mom. There's a big hole to fill that all of us are going to have to step up and fill. And this is the daughters and the grandkids, but all of us, in terms of filling those shoes and being the example that she followed, or she set. So, what a blessing, and it's an honor to talk a little bit about that. So, Sherry, I don't know if you want to go next, and we do Allie, and then, or Kristen, whatever route you want to do. So, let's welcome to the podium. Let's go, maybe Sherry. Start with.
Thank you all for coming. On March 29th, 1972, my birthday, God, my mom and dad, made us sisters. But our love for each other made us best friends. And that's what we were. Jamie and Cindy and I always called each other. And I would have many meltdowns. But when I would have my meltdowns and talk to Jamie, we would always end with, well, it is what it is. I couldn't do this the last time I had my meltdown. Because to me, it was not, it is what it is. So when I was talking to Cindy, she promised me that she would never leave me. And that we were in this together. Brian had mentioned that Jamie was full of pranks. She loved to give gifts, no matter where she was. If she saw something that reminds you of us, she'd get it, no matter what. She got me this hat last year because she knew I loved the country. She was not a country person. And we use the word stupid a lot in our family. Only because Jamie did stupid stuff. And the gifts, they were either sentimental or you just look at her like, what the heck? Recently, she dropped Stupid Bunny off to Olivia. Because Stupid Bunny was a bunny that Sophia would play at Jamie's house and just randomly put it anywhere in the yard. Jamie would have to move it and say, oh, this stupid bunny. So that's how the Stupid Bunny came along. Another thing is, Jamie and I had a bucket list. I know we all have bucket lists, but ours was kind of unique. Neither one of us wanted to go out of the country. But we wanted to go on a plane ride, and it wasn't just any plane ride. It was so we could get drunk on a plane. That was our favorite song, is to get drunk on a plane. So we were going to go to buy two-way tickets to California and fly there and fly back, just so we could get drunk on a plane. So she's up there flying without me. And that's okay, because I got her something. And I'm going to have a little drink with her, because this is where she and I were going to do. And it wasn't just talk. We were actually going to do this. So I had to have a little drink with my sister. And I'm sorry if I offend anybody. And Jamie's famous words, ah! But anyways, we had, sorry if I blew your ears out, but that's exactly her words. So we went on a New York trip, and we decided to take the subway. And we got lost. Thank God Cindy was there because she had new directions. Jamie did not. So anyways, we get in the subway and we go down the steps, and the whole time we're going up and down the steps, we're always saying OHIO. And we did this several times. So the last time, about the 5th time, going up and down these same steps, we look over and the ticket master is looking at us saying, "You got to go across the road." So we get up there and we're like, OHIO, because we were so exhausted from these steps that we had to keep going up and down. Another story is the ATM machine. Jamie was at the ATM machine getting money one day, and it's probably for the garage sales because we love garage sales. So Jamie's putting her card in, and all of a sudden she hears, "Jamie." Jamie goes, "Yes." A little bit later, "Jamie." "Yes." Here Cindy's across the road hollering at Jamie, and Jamie thought the ATM machine was talking to her. So, on with her little pranks. This past Christmas, Greg and Jamie were shopping, and Greg calls me and he says, "Hey, I got this gift for your dad." He said, "Do you want me to get it?" I'm like, "Yeah." He told me what it was, and I'm like, "That's awesome." So he gets in the car, and Jamie's like, "What do you mean you're giving it to Sherry to give to Dad? That's what I want to give him." And I'm like, "No, it's mine. I already paid him for it." So come Christmas morning, we're opening gifts, and Dad opens his gift, and he looks at Jamie and Greg. He says, "Oh, thanks for the gift." Jamie had snuck in there and took my name off of that gift and put her name on there. That's just what she would do. So, here comes the peppers flakes in the coffee. So, Mom and I were going to the garage sales, but Jamie had to go to Sam's Club to get Greg his can of coffee. And you know, Sam's Club, they're the huge box of coffee, or can of coffee. And it was a special kind, and he just had to have it, so you know. So we get the coffee, and then we head to the sales. Well, Mom and I are getting out, and Jamie opens the hatch of the Big E. The Big E is the Equinox, but she always called it the Big E. So she opens it. The coffee falls out onto the ground, and it gets a hole in it, and it's rolling down the hill. Jamie's running after it because Greg had to have his coffee. We could smell coffee the whole day. So with the coffee, Jamie got mad at Greg one night, or Greg got mad at her. Well, Jamie, no? Jamie got mad at you?
I just wanted to go to bed.
He just wanted to go to bed. But anyways, he did go to bed. So Jamie was mad at him, and she puts the coffee grounds in the coffee maker and decides to put some hot pepper flakes in it. So the next morning he gets up, goes to work, and his co-workers ask Greg for some coffee, and he's like, "Sure, have some." So he takes it, and he's like, "Greg, what's wrong with your coffee? It's hot." He goes, "What are you talking about?" He Here, Jamie had put the hot pepper flakes in his coffee. She was getting revenge. So with that, she called the Bobby Bones show, and she actually got a hold of Bobby Bones, and she got to be on his what do you call that?
Talk show.
The radio station. And she called with such excitement about being able to talk to Bobby Bones about it. So Maddie and I were going to the football game at Marion with Jamie to what was it?
He called her a little psycho.
Oh yeah, Bobby Bones called her a little psycho. Yeah, she was. So anyways, Maddie and Jamie and I were heading to Marion to Jaden's football game. And little did we know, as we were pulling up to the road, there was a police officer holding a road closed sign. So as soon as we pulled through, he closed the road. And we're like, what is this guy doing? Why is he closing the road? There was nobody coming towards us. And we were the only car on the road, and I'm not exaggerating. So we get going up the road, and there's people lined up on both sides of the road. We were in a parade. So, what should Jamie do? She tells us, give me 1 second. We're gonna honk and wave. So yeah, we were in the middle of a parade and we did not know it. So Jamie has no sense of direction. I think we all know this. So every time she would go to Walmart, she would park on row 9. Always, row 9. So one day I was on the phone with her. She says, oh my gosh, she says, I have to go into Walmart. She said, I had just been here and I can't go in, that same freezer's there. She goes, I have to go in the other door. I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. I said, you'll be so confused and you'll be lost. She's like, but I can't. And I'm like, you need to go in the same door. Because I'm pretty sure the greeter would have to help you find your car if you went into the other door. The flagpole. I don't know how we got on this story, but we were at Jamie and Greg's. And Greg and Jamie, Mom, Kristen, Sarah, and I were having this talk. Now you have to put this in your head of how this would go. So we're sitting there and Greg's like, on a carousel, the horse in the middle goes slower than the horse on the outside. And of course Jamie is goofy. She doesn't quite understand this stuff. So Jamie needs visual and she needs demonstration. So we all go out to the flagpole. I wish there was a flagpole here. Greg was holding on to the flagpole, with Kristen holding on to him, with me holding on to Kristen, then Sarah, then Jamie. Greg starts going around in a circle. So he's barely moving in a circle. Jamie's on the end. Jamie has short legs. And the flagpole is on a hill. So Greg goes around, he's barely moving. Here's Jamie. I can't catch up. And so Greg's like, you get it? You get it?
Oh.
We get done, we're standing there, and he said, "Now do you understand?" She says, "No." But her little legs, she just kept on going. But she did not, she still doesn't understand how the horse on the end goes, faster. On April 9th at 8:30, would have been probably our last group text from Jamie. Jamie loved group text. Brendan did not like group text. And that group text was, "Once this is all over with, I'm hugging everybody. Everybody, get ready for a long, awkward hug. I'm going to make this weird." I think we can all find peace knowing that God knelt down beside Jamie that night and said, "Please take my hand and I will lead you home, my child." I think that's because Jamie had no sense of direction. And I do believe that she is looking down on us and wondering what we are doing. Please continue to pray for my brother-in-law Greg, Rachel, Kristen, Sarah, Maddie, Jade, Brogan, Kendall, my mom and dad, and the whole family. We loved her so much.
Allie? Where are you? Patches your coat.
Yeah.
Take my hood off. So. Okay. This one. Yes.
Get right on top
close
of
to
it.
your mouth.
Oh, close. Okay. I have thought about how to start this for many days, and I've decided that there isn't ever going to be a right way. Jamie, although my aunt, was someone I considered to be my second mom. Growing up, Sarah and I have been very close. I spent many days and nights at Jamie and Greg's home, and some weeks I spent more time there than at my own home. Jamie was always so laid back and let Sarah and I just do about anything we wanted. For example, Sarah and I would eat spoonfuls of sugar and try to stay up late, while Jamie would fall asleep on the couch. She would also let us tear apart her kitchen, getting out all the pans and mixing sugars and spices in the water. What mom does that? Jamie, because all she cared about was us having fun and wanting to be at her home. Another memory I will always cherish is her taking us Black Friday shopping every year. One year in particular, we had been out all night and we went to Toys R Us around 5 a.m. While we were in the store, she asked an employee if he worked in the toy department. Sarah and I looked at each other and started laughing, and she, of course, didn't get it. And she says, "Why are you laughing?" And we said, "Duh, he works in the toy department. The whole store is toys." She could always make us laugh and was always wanting to have fun, especially on Family Fun Fridays when her, Sherry, Grandma, Sarah, and I would go garage sailing. Jamie was also the most selfless person I know. She was always worried about others and cared for them. Something I will never forget is her and Greg making special trips down to Columbus to see my new apartments. She was so supportive, even though I moved outside of Butler. A couple of years ago, I showed her the idea of getting a chocolate chip cookie dough flurry with chocolate ice cream at the Dairy Bell, and every time she would go there and get one, she would send me a picture and say, "Yum." I love those. One thing I will never forget is every time she would call, I would answer and she would say, "Hey, are you busy?" And that's something I can always hear in my head. After her passing, I was scrolling through my Facebook, and she had taken one of those quizzes and shared the results. And reading them, I smiled because it fit her all too well. The results said, "Jamie could brighten your day with a smile. She's not afraid to feel it all. She lives, she laughs, and she cries too. Jamie is a dreamer who is destined to achieve her goals. Despite everything she's been through, she still has a generous heart and a kind soul. Jamie is a fire that can't be tamed, beautiful to watch but dangerous to mess with." The last part of that I laughed because she was someone who didn't play pranks on because she would come back to get you. If Jamie was here right now, I would wrap my arms around her and force her to give me the biggest hug. She would want us to find comfort knowing that she is with the Lord. To be absent from the body is to be present of the Lord. 2 Corinthians 5:8.
Good news, everybody. I have one page with big font. I don't understand God's plan. I just know I have to trust it. This is by far the hardest thing I've ever experienced in my life, but I am so thankful that God blessed me with 34 years of my mother's unconditional love, bullheadedness when she made up her mind, and her never-ending pranks. I know we've all butted heads with Mom at one point or another, or a lot, but that's because she was operating solely out of love, and that's something that most of us don't know how to do. My mom showed me what love was by loving each and every one of us. She showed me what love was by the way she spoke about Greg and the way she cared for him, and actually allowed him to care for her and spoil her, and the way she knew how to keep him on his toes just enough, like with the red pepper flakes. Mom loved with all her heart. She shined her brightest when she was with family, and those she claimed as family. I am so thankful she found an incredible man to help lead us through this. A man who will always be my second dad, and a man who loves us just intensely as she did. We have all gained the best guardian angel to guide us through this life, and we will continue to live for her and share her love and look forward to being reunited someday. It was a typical mom move to pull Greg into our family and make him fall in love with us girls and leave him here with us.
All right, a couple of people handed me some things to read. A couple things in these stories I thought was really interesting. It was I've heard like one aspect of the story, and then I would hear another dimension, and then I would hear another dimension. So the red pepper flake story I thought was funny because like I heard the original story. Greg took the thermos to work, and his coworker, I think it's Mylan, said that Greg thought he's coming down with a sore throat. Mylan turns to him and says, "Is your throat burning?" And then they kind of made the connection, and then Greg just asked her, "Jamie, why'd you do that?" And she's like, "You made me mad." That's all she said. And so there was that aspect. Then I hear the Bobby Bones story where she, out of all the times that she could make it through on the airwaves, she gets that one and shares the story, and he verifies that she's a little psycho. But I thought was kind of cool too was, and then I hear another aspect that Greg's telling me that they got her back a little bit is they were out fishing on the creek, and the coworker was there as well, and he's reeling in all these fish. And Jamie's like, "How are you getting in all these fish?" And here they had planted the red pepper powder right in the tackle box, and he pulls that out, and he's like, "This is what I'm using." It's kind of like a get her back. Then I hear another aspect, I think it's like the fourth facet of the story. Brad calls me, Greg and my other brother, and he's like, "You realize before that even happened, I was at their house, and Greg and Brad both love spicy foods, and she's like, Brad's like, could you give me one of those peppers?" And he thought she's giving her a jalapeno. Well, she gave her a habanero, is that how you say it? which he's like, jalapeno is like a 10, a habanero is like 110. And so she pulled that out and secretly gave it to Brad. Brad eats it. Brad's like, I ate a whole loaf of bread. I drank a whole gallon of milk. I was laying on the couch in the fetal position. And Jamie's just loving it, watching Brad in pain. But
She denied it.
she denied it. Yeah, she denied it. It was a mistake or something. But once again, there was like a planning. There's a planning aspect to some of her pranks, and then there's some that are just opportunistic. Like she's there. At one point, I guess she came across a Rusty Wallace life-size cutout. How this came into her possession, we do not know. But anyway, she's like, aha, opportunity. So I think it was Cindy's that she put it in the door or the window, rings the bell, loves to hear the scream, and then the laughter afterwards. And so I think Mrs. Snyder says, I think we still have it down in the garage. So once again, it was presented, why not? And so, and then some of this even mixes with service. She was over, I think, checking Cindy and Tim's mail for them while they're gone. And while she's doing it, there just happened to be a dead raccoon laying there. And so, hey, there's a dead raccoon and there's an empty mailbox. Those two kind of go together. And so she put the raccoon in the mailbox. So once again, I heard that story a while ago. Which, by the way, I was talking to Brad. I was like, we were three brothers, and I don't think we pulled as many stunts on each other as Jamie and her sisters did. But anyway, I heard that story a while ago. Then I'm hearing another aspect is that they're telling the story to someone like 10 years later. So Sarah's playing soccer. They've become good friends with the Kovacics. Is that how you say their last name?
Close enough.
Close enough. I'm sorry, Jenny and Rick. And they're telling the story, like 10 years later to them about this whole raccoon, or quite a while later at least. I don't know exactly 10. And they didn't know Jenny and Rick back then. And they're telling the story. And all of a sudden, Jenny's like, that was you? I was the mail carrier for that house. So Jamie's that good that she doesn't even prank people now. She's pranking people in the future that she doesn't even know yet. And so she's that good. And there's something with animals. Like it seems like there's a little bit of theme with that. Is I guess my dad. If you're not familiar with my dad makes Frank's famous fudge. My dad's from West Virginia originally, just like Mrs. Snyder, and he makes this fudge that everybody likes. I guess it's his way to win everybody's favor in the world. And so he would give it to the girls, Jamie's sisters, even on their birthdays and things like that, or different people. And so so Jamie brought down a tin, of what that she described as Frank's famous fudge for Cindy's birthday, and Cindy's all excited. She goes to open it, and here, just like the raccoon, she's now put a dead mouse in the tin. So once again, the joy was hearing the scream, hearing the laughter. Oh, Jamie! Afterwards, and so she wasn't afraid. She wasn't afraid to pull off a joke, no matter how tough it might be. So, a few things that people have handed me. I don't know if the garage sailing story came out. I don't think that came out, did it? So, once again, opportunistic. So, the gals were out garage sailing, which was mentioned earlier by Sherry, but they were out garage sailing. They come into a neighborhood where there's a cul-de-sac that's involved in this garage sale, which, it's not cool to live on a dead-end street, but it's cool to live on a cul-de-sac, right? So, talking about Rusty Wallace, Jamie decides to spice this up, and while they're on the cul-de-sac, Kristen's telling me the story, Mrs. Snyder's talking about it as well, is that she just decides, like she's won the Daytona 500, she just starts doing donuts in this cul-de-sac over and over. And so, 1 minute the garage selling, looking for the sale,